Digital Dilemmas is a Lenk Media original podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Digital Dilemmas with John Murphy, your host, me, and Amber Clevenger. Nice to see you, Amber, today on our show.
Nice to see you as well.
As everybody can see who's watching via YouTube, it's actually sunny and warm here in Connecticut, which is, well, we had our spring. We had our 2 days last week. So if you're from the Northeast, you know what I'm talking about. You have winter, fake spring, winter again, spring for about a week, and then it's 80 to 95. So we are now in the 80 to 95 category. But at least it's sunny. I'm not going to complain.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who's not going to complain?
I'm not. I'm not.
You've been complaining for 2 solid days.
Well, if you look, for those from the
If we
Northeast,
move
they know what I'm talking
somewhere
about.
where you
Can we
love to
just have 70 to 80 for a month, like spring? So yeah. But I'd rather be complaining about it being sunny and too warm than complaining about it being cold and rainy and snowy.
funny thing, it's this to the people you're complaining to, it's all the same.
All right. So on today's episode, this is going to be one of our short episodes where Amber and I will be in the studio today. We don't have any guests. And what I wanted to talk about was a couple things. One of them is AI in the news. And then we can choose to talk about Halo. I want to talk about that, Amber, or maybe some AI questions the average citizen would want to be informed about. But most importantly, I think after doing this show for a few months, what I want to get across by having a show like today, where we summarize everything and talk about a couple small, not small topics, but shorter duration, is how AI is part of our world. It's not going anywhere. I know I say this all the time, but I can't say it enough. It's not going anywhere, and it's part of our world, and we need to keep talking about it, sharing best practices, learn how to adjust. So anyway, that's what we'll be doing today. So anyway, Amber, you had shared an article with me to jump in regarding, it was in the New York Times, regarding how companies, and I'm not sure if most people are aware of this. I know our tech execs and tech audience are, but any company can buy a large language model, AI, LLM for short, and train it using certain data sources to be the AI chat for that company when you log into that company
So
or go to their website.
basically, to translate for the people who didn't start out as programmers, you can buy one of these LLMs and train it to speak with whatever voice you want.
Mm-hmm.
So you can give it a character almost.
Yeah, and that's actually in some ways more concerning than the Chat GPTs or Gemini of the world. Because Chat
Well,
GPT and
let's
Gemini,
just say concerning in a different way. I don't know.
okay, all right,
Less.
concerning in a different way. So Amber, why don't you share with us just the headline of what the concern was that the New York Times was researching, and we could talk about it.
Was it the article about the right-leaning
Yep.
models and the left-leaning ones?
You got it.
So the New York Times looked at companies that have bought large language models and trained them to speak with different political voices. So, so that if you ask a question, it will give you an answer, but it will give you an answer with a political slant, sort of a political bias. And I think that what you're talking about in terms of the concern is that people may not know when they're using these these forms of AI or these, because I like even me as the average person, like I don't know that I would know the difference between Chat GPT and
Thanks for teeing that up, Amber. So, yeah, the average person, when they go to use AI, large language model interfaces, chatbots, whatever, where you're going to have a conversation, depending on what site you're going to, I don't think most people understand that each site can train their AI bot or chatbot, for lack of a better phrase, in whatever way they choose. So if you went to a conservative or liberal leaning news site or information site or politician site or whatever, that AI large language model is being trained on sources that that company wants them to be trained on. So for example, if it was a right-leaning site, it could be trained on information from Parler, Truth Social, and some conservative Reddit sites. And the exact opposite if it's a left-leaning site.
no,
And
that just tells the truth.
what?
That's
Oh,
just being
stop.
funny.
And what the test did was what at the New York Times is they asked the left-leaning site and the right-leaning sites the exact same question. And the responses they received on each were wildly different. And not only were wildly different, but were the language they used, the phrases they used were all uh, repetitions of what you
Tailored
see,
to
yeah, to that audience.
that
And
audience.
and that
Um,
audience is thinking it's hearing the truth because it's using AI.
well, so I have sort of an interesting take on this.
Okay.
Um, I'm old, not as old as you, but
Yeah.
older than many. And I was brought up in, at least when I was a child, the age of Walter Cronkite and, news sources being thought of as neutral. Um, my father was a journalist. He was never registered with any political party because as a journalist, he felt, it was sort of like understood that you were reporting on the news and you were reporting on politics and you didn't have a bias. That has changed so drastically, um, you know, over the years and especially over the last sort of 25 years that we now, like you just said, we have sources of news that are considered not just, like hard leaning right or left. Um,
But
and
yes, go ahead.
but to your point, I think people maybe have adjusted now, but I think a lot of the sort of misinformation or disinformation that is out there because people are listening to what they think is news. You know, they think it's the neutral news broadcast, but it's being presented with a specific agenda.
Well, take it a step further. What if they're not even going to a news site? What if the average consumer is going to a company site, a corporate site, an information site like a magazine?
I understand what you're saying. Something that they believe is neutral.
Right. They believe it's neutral. It's not, I'll use the example. It's not Fox News. It's not MSNBC. They believe maybe they're at some magazine site or some what they believe neutral site. And they start having a conversation with that company's large language model in order to learn something. And once again, to the New York Times research point, you don't really know where that large language model got trained.
And I guess that's my point. That's what happened when we started seeing bias in the news. You stopped being able to rely on the nightly news
Got it. Got it. Yeah, we're not
as an
relying, we don't
unbiased
trust
source.
Walter Cronkite or John Chancellor or Tom Brokaw. We're not right. We are now
We're now in the
Yeah.
age of every different media outlet has been branded with some agenda or other, you know, what anywhere along the spectrum, whether you're Mother Jones or Breitbart, you know, um, everybody falls somewhere on the spectrum, and people understand that now. To, I mean, maybe not like really old people, like, but most people understand that now. And I think, I guess my point is, this is like the begin, this is the beginning of that.
This is the beginning of it, and I think it now moves to what I want to talk about next, and that is corporations and then individuals as employees and or citizens. So our friends at Cyabra this week were at a global conference, and again they shared some information. We've had them on our show. We love them. Sharing some data regarding how if you are in the communications industry, the PR industry, they're finding that over 30%, or roughly 30%, I'll use that phrase, I don't want to quote them, I don't have the article in front of me. 30% of the attacks or information about that company that is shared online are created from bots and artificial intelligence in order to attack those companies. And they spend a good chunk of their time defending against disinformation, misinformation generated by AI. And so again, to your point that we were just talking about, the average citizen needs to become more and more educated and aware, not only when it comes to quote unquote news, but when it comes to news about a company, news about a celebrity, news about an athletic or sports franchise. We need to really be on top of our game as to critical thinking. Where does this information come from? Who was the source? Is this worthy of my being upset, concerned, or joyous, or is this just all disinformation spread down the line? And it was just a really interesting, another interesting piece of information that really made me think that people like you and I and our friends and our children got to be on top of things. There's the time where we could just turn on the news, watch news, read an article, close. Those days are over. So I just wanted to share that.
No, it's interesting. It's like watching the birth of anything.
So one of the things I don't know. This is a short episode, and I want to get into Halo in a second. But one of the things that I think this tees up as we go through with the summer shows is what happens in a society for people, and I know I've brought this up to you in the past, people over 70
Mm.
or the economically disadvantaged who do not have access to the information you and I do regarding, hey, what's going on in AI and where this information come from and all the things we talk about on this show. If we thought we had a digital divide starting when the internet came out in the 90s, I can't even imagine the divide that's beginning to occur now between, aging populations who are not really aware or interested.
So I have a hot take that no one's
Go
gonna like.
ahead. What?
Um, and here it is. First of all, I think the divide is very different now. I think the original digital divide did break down on socioeconomic lines. And I think that has changed with the widespread of use of mobile phones. Pretty much everybody has a phone.
Yep.
They're unhoused, the unhoused population, a large percentage of that population has a phone. So it's no longer a question of access. Most people have access to the internet and to the information.
They have access to the technology.
To the technology, yes.
Right. Okay.
Where the gap is sort of like education, or familiarity. Like, I mean, I see it with my mother, my mother reads a lot. She's a big reader. I'm a big reader. I have adopted the Kindle. I have attempted to get my mother to adopt the Kindle because And I know everybody, there's people out there, oh, there's nothing like a real book. I'm a fan of the real book. I'm not a fan of the real book. But if I had a hard copy or a paperback copy of a print copy of every book I read, there would be no room in this house for the people. Like it's not feasible.
As the person you
And
live with, I can confirm that.
and and when I travel, I would have to take an extra bag for the books. Like I'm a big reader. So the Kindle has changed my life. My mother, and I think it could change my mother's life, but my mother cannot adapt to the technology. She when it's set up and open to the page and on which she left it, she's happy to read. But as soon as it closes and she has to open it up again and she gets lost in the technology. My mother's 82. And it I think that that's probably true for a lot of people in that age range, whether it's the Kindle or navigating information on the interwebs. Um, and this is my unpopular hot take, those people are all going to be dead soon. And it's not going to matter.
Yeah, I get it.
And
I
what we're
get
going to
it.
be dealing with is you and I are going to be the old people, and we're going to be dealing with a world run by a generation that has no understanding or appreciation for digital privacy, that has complete familiarity with technology. In fact, a much, much better understanding of technology than you or I, and a much more, is much more facility and ease in that world, and sort of a lack of a different lack.
Yeah, so that leads to what I share with my students all the time and anybody else, if
And anyone else you can get to
who will
listen.
listen to me. It if you or you, the royal you, if we are not continually engaged in how the world is changing, and it changes so quickly, it's an issue. It's a concern for those who choose not to.
Well,
And
it is. It's funny. My therapist asked me, it was a bit of a tangent, I'll give you that. Um, but it came up in my most recent session, how I felt about uh, Amazon, buying things on Amazon.
Mhm.
And I was kind of like, well, I am conflicted about it because, in on the one hand, I think it is a giant company that is essentially a monopoly that has taken over and, edged out a lot of um, smaller outlets. On the other hand, I kind of feel like, I'm sorry that you want to be a blacksmith, but that job doesn't exist anymore. Like the world is changing, and that's one of the ways that it's changing, and there isn't really a way to stop it from changing. So, and my compromise was that I'd try to buy from the small business companies on Amazon, which actually has worked really well for me. And I've found some really, really great small businesses that do work with Amazon and sell their products through Amazon. Um, but sort of to your point, the change is inevitable, and it is important to keep talking about it. And it's important for everybody to keep talking about it. It's not, there isn't any, sort of, I know you say this all the time, John, when people ask you about the podcast and who the audience is. Um, the audience is everyone.
I've
The
said,
audience is literally everyone because there isn't anyone who is not going to be affected by these developments.
yeah, and just to share, I'm part of a group at the University of Connecticut that started literally a week ago, where we're getting it's a think tank, for lack of a better phrase, of professors who are literally aged 25 to 75. And we're talking about AI and these other emerging tech and how we can better use them. And in the first meeting, you can hear the divergent backgrounds that you just spoke of. We have people who are older that um,
Are coming from a fear-based place, maybe,
they're
or
worried, they're fearful,
right.
they understand, they're open-minded, they understand this is coming, they can't change things, they better get on board and figure it out, but they're very, very nervous. And the younger audience is it's good for them to hear that. Um, and it's also for the same reason, literally when I started teaching 7 years ago, we actually did an exercise where we had in the front of the room someone in their 20s, somewhere in their 40s, somewhere in their 60s. How do they solve problems? And all the answers were different. Some people like face to face, some people like texting, some people like the phone, some people like email, etc. And then how they problem solve.
That's so
Every
interesting.
generation,
I would
every
love that.
generation. It's a great exercise. Every generation had a different answer. And the value in that, the value of the think tank, the value of this conversation is to realize if you are 22, if you're 24 and you're going into the workplace, you'll be working with people who are multi-generational in your office, people from your age all the way up to the 70s. And it's good to know how these different generations solve problems. And vice versa. If you are an executive or you've been at a company for 30, 40 years and you're in your 60s and you have young and smart recent graduates coming into your company, you need to understand how they solve problems. How do they look at things? It's one of the
Yeah,
beauties of a
understand that
workplace, right? Right.
everybody of different, no matter of everybody from different backgrounds, whether or different demographics, whether it's age or socioeconomic or gender or whatever, brings something different to the party.
And I think this recent phenomenon of AI and other emerging techs, it's happening so quickly, it's rapid, it's scaring people, but it's really the same thing. And I'm hoping that this show, can bring that very diverse audience together and we can share and learn. Um, I want to go to the next topic, Amber, before we drop today,
My new
because I know,
show?
yeah, your new show, Halo, which this summer we want to have some entertainment industry execs on the show. We want to talk about that industry. And I know that you watched this show on the
So
flight
this is what
from,
happened. Halo, I did not play I don't play video games and I don't play first person shooter games, which I'm pretty sure Halo is. Um, I don't play really video games like that at all. But I had seen when I guess the promotional campaign for Halo was uh, pretty effective because I kept seeing it everywhere. Even though that's not the kind of content that we typically watch um, in the house. And I kind of knew it wouldn't really be up John's alley. So I was on a plane recently and I watched the first episode on the plane on the way home. And I kind of liked it. Like I was like, I'm into it. But I think, as I think I've mentioned on the show or before, it's hard to tell. It looks like a video, and I know it's based on a video game, but it looks like a video game. Like I wasn't sure. I had to look up if it was actors or not, or all CGI. Even the main people. It looks like Madden almost,
does I've seen one
and
episode. It kind of looks like, is that an AI person or is that a real actor?
and not the aliens, the people.
Right, right.
And at the same time, sort of concurrent with this, my our kids, and I think it was Andrew when he was up last weekend, mentioned that the NCAA is coming out with the new Madden, the new NCAA Madden,
Yep.
and showed us the first promo for it, and it's insane. It looks like a real, like he showed it to you, right?
It looks like a real game. I
The
mean, if
foot,
you looked at it quickly and didn't really,
not even that
spend time.
quickly.
I know, but you would think if you threw it on TV and a sport highlight, you might think it's real.
It's crazy. And
Right.
So John, so I was like, John, do you think like let's all watch the pilot of Halo together? And at first, and I was like, it's going to be too violent for you. And John was like, oh, please. You know all the World War II movies I watch. It's not going to be too violent for me. How violent was it?
The first 10 minutes are very violent. I did not like. I don't like. Here's the thing. I can watch a war movie violence because it's kind of toned down a little bit because
That's what that was my
in
point.
a real war, I think humans, at least up until now, in the entertainment industry, especially before the movie with Tom Hanks, the D-Day
Saving
movie,
Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan. Up until then, war movies were a little bit toned down because, anybody who was a
Well,
friend, a relative would say that's not what it's really like. But when you watch the video game violence, it's like, whoa. At least from that, maybe I represent my generation. It's like a little bit too much. But then after the original violence, and I stuck with it, the storyline and how the show is made intrigued me, and I think I'm going to watch it some more to see if I like it because there's a couple things here going on that I want to talk about with entertainment folks this summer. First of all, how much is AI used in the production of this show? That's one topic. Is it prescient in the sense that is this like Star Trek in the 60s where a lot of those instruments came true because the producers were thinking how humans would behave in the early 2000s. And I'm watching this show and
I have yet to be beamed up anywhere. What came true from
that's
Star
the only
Trek?
thing that's not happening. You
All
take
right.
that Star Trek, and I'm not a Trekkie, but a lot of that stuff is happening.
I think they refer to
MRIs.
themselves as Trekkers.
I'm not okay, whatever. I'm trying not to offend that audience. Um, but I'm watching the show, the Halo, and I see real humans. They're a group of people on the show. Then I see humans that were trained to be called quote unquote Spartans, which are real humans, but they've been somehow robotized, or I don't know.
They've
Their
clearly,
brains have
we've
been
only
their
seen one show. So these
yeah,
are, we're
but
not spoiling anything, but they've clearly had their memories erased and are in
yeah,
some way not human.
neurological technology, which we're hoping to get an expert on neurological technology this summer, is another group, and then beyond that are the robots. What are they called?
Well, they're not in the show, they're aliens. The colony, I think they come from the
No, the people
colony.
that can't be the people, those giant things that came in and the Spartans fought with.
Yeah, those are aliens.
Yeah, I know, but I wondered if they had a name.
I can't remember what they're called.
Okay. And I'm wondering as I watched this, is it going to develop into what humans think the future kind of looks like? And that's interesting.
I'm going to
Not
keep
nec
watching the show.
not necessarily the outcome, but in how technology um, changes humans and the planet we live on. That's the part that intrigued me. So we have that show on one end of the scale, and I'll start to wrap up the show with this. The other end of the spectrum, we're watching Shogun, which are humans, obviously, in the, what was it,
Well,
1700s?
the 1600s, early
1600s, early
1600s.
1700s in Japan, and the development of the warrior culture. And talk about the 1600s to maybe the 2500s. And I'm kind of enjoying that because I'm watching human um, development over a period of centuries. And I think it's kind of interesting to watch that in an entertainment way to give you perspective as humans, we don't stay still. What we were in 1300 is not what we were in 1600, which is not what we were in 1900. And I think it's good to get your head around that. Anyway, I find that interesting.
I love that comparison. I hadn't thought about that, thinking about Halo and Shogun, sort of
Yeah, I thought about it when I was watching the other
in the
day
same
because
frame.
then
That's
we watched Shogun the next night and it was a warrior culture.
well, it's
And
yeah, it's in the past,
they're having a lot of battles, a lot of
but it's interesting to see what sort of themes remain the same, what themes are
yeah,
constant, you know?
yeah, yeah.
I like that. I think we should circle back to this when we've seen more Halo.
I do, and I want to talk about this to people who create these shows, to people who produce these
Absolutely.
shows,
Yeah.
and if they think about this, and I think it'd be really cool for our audience to see in an entertainment way that the issues we deal with every day that we bring to this show, this is not our issues of today are
It's
not like
not
the end of, it's not the
theoretical.
end of the world. It's not theoretical. It's
Well,
not
that's true, but it's also not
fear-based.
theoretical. It's being, how is it practically affecting different industries and different people and their jobs and their lives? All right, on that note, we will wrap up. Thank you for listening/watching. And as always, if you have any questions, email us. We've been getting emails. We actually are going to have our first guest who contacted us via email, which is very exciting. So if you're interested in being a guest, also email us. Digital Dilemmas at Lenk, LENK.media. So feel free to drop us a line, share your thoughts, ask questions, or let us know that you want to be on the show.
All right, Digital Dilemma fans, that wraps up another episode. Thanks for tuning in and navigating our tech world with us.
Please rate us and leave a review. And if you enjoyed it, tune in next time. We'd also love it if you would send us any questions or suggest guests via email. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Digital Dilemmas is a Lenk Media original podcast.